Hello and welcome to this video in which I'm going to show you how I painted these 15mm Blue Moon British Napoleonic figures. These are based for sharp practice and they are tabletop standard, so this is not going to be display type figures. These are literally for getting them quickly onto the table to play games with. The first thing we do is we create the base for these. I use 15mm diameter MDF bases here, 2mm thick, and I'm putting on some polyfiller. You can get this in any of the DIY shops across the country. I think this is called spackle in the US. But I use a flat-headed screwdriver, small screwdriver, to take a small amount of the filler and then just blend in the figure's base with the actual MDF base that they're going to sit on in the game. This will probably take about 24 hours to dry. So just leave these once they're done. Don't touch them once you've smoothed them off, and clean off any excess with your finger around the side as well. Then once that is dry, we work away with the undercoating. Here I'm using Vallejo Tan Yellow because this is a good skin colour and I don't want to have to go in and do the face later on. And also this is a very good undercoat colour for red because red has a very thin pigment on it, paints wise, so any dark undercoats are not going to look very good. The red is not going to look as bright as it would do under a light undercoat like this. This will also protect your figures as well from people handling them during games. The next thing to paint is the red, and as you can see this is Vallejo's flat red, and I'm just painting this straight onto that undercoat of tan yellow, and it's retaining its brightness. If this was on a darker undercoat, the red itself would be a little bit muddy and probably quite dark as well at this stage. Now you don't have to be particularly neat here. I'm trying to be just because I want to cut down any later work, but you can always go back and neaten areas up once you've finished the block painting. So this is just the basic block painting of the figures themselves. I would usually do quite a few at once, not just one at a time, especially at 15mm. In this particular case I was working on about 15 figures at this particular time. Our next large area are the trousers and trouser legs. In this case I'm using neutral grey. This is again a Vallejo colour. You can use any that you like really. Some of the British soldiers wore white trousers as well. I think the Grenadier Guards did at least at Waterloo. These are for the 1815 100 Days campaign. You can tell that by the Shakos. They're Belgic Shakos which have got the threads on them and the plumes. So this again just ensure that you get all of the areas of the legs while you're doing this. Using the same colour I will then move on to his blanket roll, which is there just at the top of his knapsack. This is grey as well, so that is just painted in a nice block colour, very easy and simple. And next up we are onto black, so this is obviously his Shako here. Again, do try to be a little bit neater here because you probably don't want to go back and do that face again if you can avoid it. So just follow the lines and just try and keep it nice and neat and keep your painting sharp here as much as you can. Then next is just to paint that knapsack on the back and also his cartridge case as well. You can see on his right hip there. Both of these were black. I think the knapsack came in a few different kind of colours like dark browns and things, but I'm going to stick with black for this particular one here. Do be careful, like I say, with the black here, simply because if you get it onto the red, it's going to be quite difficult to go back again and cut that red in, because the red on black is not going to look very nice, and you want to keep that nice sharp red colour if you can. And here I'm painting his bayonet scabbard, and I've also painted his boots as well. Just again, just be really careful and neat here. Just follow the detail of the figure, and then you won't have to go back and repair any of your mistakes later. With the black finished, we can now move on to some of the other colours. So now I'm using beige brown by Vallejo to paint the wood on his musket here. So I've just got the underside of the barrel and also the stock of it as well there, you can see. I'm also using it as well to paint his hair, just to be again very careful, just to go in and do a little stripe of brown just to differentiate it from the Shako and also from his flesh as well. And now the fun begins. We start painting white. Now we do have to be as neat as we can with this. Don't worry too much if you go over the detail, because you will simply be able just to go back and cut in again with the undercolour. But I'm painting cross belts here. I'm also painting his epaulettes as well, and I will move on to the Shako and also the plume as well on that Shako as well. But as I say, use as smaller brush as you can and try to get in on the detail. Really take your time over this, because this is worthwhile the work that you'll put into it. His bread bag here is also painted white. You can see it sitting underneath his water canteen there on his left hip. So again, I will be really careful and try just to be as neat as I can and getting in as close as I can to the lines on the mould of the figure itself. And then we're starting on the straps of the backpack as well, using a small brush and a steady hand as much as you can. Again, following that detail line. Don't worry too much if the paint bleeds over onto the black, because we can just go back and we can paint a black line against those. I try to get these things first time, but I very rarely do, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. It's a case of just trying to take your time, but knowing that you can always go back and repair any mistakes anyway. Then next up, I'm painting the braids on the Belgic Shako, again using a very tiny brush, or the small as you can get, with relatively wet, thinned paint, and just wiping that stripe around, really basically going over the top of the detail there. And I mentioned about going back and just cutting things in, so here I've just gone back with the red just to neaten up those cross belts again, just to actually any paint that I've splashed over onto his uniform, I'm just cleaning those up with the red itself. And while I've got that red, I will go back and just paint the bottom of his Shako plume there, because they were red and white. Then I'm painting blue onto the water bottle. I think this is French blue by Humbrol. It's a very old paint I've lost the number on the top of it, but I'm fairly certain it's French blue, but any blue will do, really. Also at this point I will paint the collars and cuffs as well. I'm doing these in blue for the King's German Legion, but you can do these in whichever colour, whichever unit you're painting up in particular at that time. Very simple. Again, just be as neat as you can so you don't have to go back and undo any of your work. Next we paint bronze on the Shako plate on the front of the Shako, and also on the cross belts as well. Our next metal colour is the gunmetal for his muskets, so I'm just painting this in gunmetal steel. I think this is a Vallejo paint, and literally just going over the bayonet and also the barrel of his gun as well. Very simple. I would probably paint the firing mechanism, the flintlock area as well around his hand. And our final stage on the block painting is just to paint Vallejo's flat earth on the base. Just again cut in as close as you can to his boots down there. Try not to go over them if you can. If you can avoid it, you can always go back and clean them up once everything is dry, but this is just painted very simply, very quickly. Once you've checked him for any mistakes you've made and you've cleaned them up, all the block colouring, I then go in with the AGRAX Earth Shade. This is Games Workshop's wash. My favourite wash is probably the best on the market as far as I'm concerned. It's quite a dark brownish colour, and I will just liberally slap this all over the figure, and then we'll leave that to dry and come back and start working on the highlights. Now the AGRAX has dried, we can go back and start doing highlights. I've got a slightly brighter red. This is one of Humbrol's paints. Again, I can't remember the actual number of this, but any red will do, because you get lots of different manufacturers of tunics in the Napoleonic period, so don't worry too much about it. So I paint all the cloth highlights that I can see, any of the raised areas, just to give you that three-tone really of the original base colour, the AGRAX shade, and then your lighter top tone as well on top. And once you've done the red, I start working on the grey, so I'm just using neutral grey again just to go back over some of the highlights on the legs and the trousers in particular, just some of the higher spots. And then I'll also move in and I will do a couple of stripes on the top of those blanket rolls as well there, just to pick those out. And that's really all you need. White is also highlighted, again just using the base white, just going over the top of some of the straps and the plumes and his bread bag and that kind of thing, just bringing out a little spot of highlights on them, including the braids you can see there, so I'm just going over the top of them as well, just to give them that kind of 3D look. This part also includes the cross belts, the epaulets, and also the straps on his backpack as well, and then that's you done with the white, nice and easy. One of the final stages for the highlighting is just to go back and hit those spots, the higher spots on his flesh, so his hands and some parts of his face as well, just to make them stand out and pop a little bit. And then I'm using oily steel just over that gunmetal, again just to give it a tiny bit of a shine really, just to pick it up and just to show off those edges of the blades and the weapons. And the final part here is just to do the blue again on his collars and cuffs, and also on those bottles as well on his back. I didn't do the straps for the muskets. I've left them in their tan yellow, bit dirty. They could have been white, but I've left them dirty. He's on campaign, they should be dirty. And then it's just a case of sealing the figure with some matte varnish. I use Winsor & Newton Professional Artist Matte Spray. It's the best stuff on the market as far as I'm concerned, and it's always worked well for me. And once your matte varnish is dry, probably leave it 24 hours just to be sure. I will then take some undiluted PVA glue and I brush this straight onto the base. There you can see all the way around, and sprinkle static grass all over the figure's base. So absolutely cover them in static grass, and that's him finished. And then altogether there's 31 British 15mm Napoleonic figures. I did these over a couple of sessions, painting about 15 or so in each session, just going through the various stages that I've already shown you in this video. And soon enough I had enough for, well, at least a small game of short practice. Thank you for watching. I hope this has been useful. Hope you've enjoyed the video at least. If you have, please subscribe, give me a thumbs up, drop a comment, tell me you liked it, tell me you didn't like it. And if you did like it, tell your friends. Thanks for watching.